Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Poetry Thursday. Every Thursday, once in a while, a few booktubers will talk about poetry, maybe read you a poem, maybe read you more than one. I have been trying to keep up with this, especially since I have turned it into a melodrama. I am reading one book only, 20th Century American Poetry. I found this anthology very good, even though I know what's coming. The title gives away what's coming. Gibberish is coming. Unsellable, impenetrable, gated community gibberish is coming. But it's not here yet. It's not here yet. We have a ways to go. We are here, and probably about here is when this is going to start to become a real melodrama. Instead of that, right at the moment, we have a couple of the other curses of modern anthologies. When did this thing get made? $50 for a big heavy hardcover. When did you get made? I'm going to say the early aughts. When did you get made? Yes, 2004. Which is a little too early for some of the social forces that have made poetry and literature anthologies in the last, say, 15 years completely worthless, actively deceitful. The 2004 is a little bit early for that. The world of publishing and academia was not ideologically captured in 2004. It was not a 100% total wash where you are, if you step foot into that world, you are stepping foot into active promulgation of propaganda rather than anything valid or objective. 2004, you were just getting the very beginnings of things like that, and they were coming from largely good sources. Keep in mind that we should keep in mind that the weird Twitter politics overcompensating that happens now in anthologies originated in good sources. If you're in the mid 1990s or the late 1980s and you are putting together a big poetry anthology, a big new $40 poetry anthology that's going to go out into every bookstore in the country, it's good if you stop and think in the late 1980s, the early 1990s, what you would certainly not have thought in the late 1940s, early 1950s, which is this thing 99% white? Is it 99% men? It's a good thing for you as the editorial team to step back from your product in the late 1980s, early 1990s and say, and ask those questions. That's a good thing. Because it stops you from producing an anthology that may, one way or another, despite your intentions, be skewed. And as you know, if you take even a tiny look at the news in the 21st century, that impulse has been snatched up by the greedy hands of weird alt-left blue-haired zealots and run past the end goal, outside the field, across the highway, and to the next county. So that you have tenured academics at Rutgers saying that the real thing, the real project for people of color is to eradicate white people. Just wipe the MFers out. Just take them out. And if a tenured professor at Rutgers is saying that for a podcast, you can guarantee she's teaching it in her classroom and probably making white students stand up and apologize. For holding slaves, I guess, or whatever. In other words, you know the excesses. You know the excesses. And unfortunately, those excesses now rule the world of anthologies. So if you got a book titled 20th Century American Poetry that was made not in 2004, but in 2024, two-thirds of the people that we have been talking about while reading this book would not be in here. That's not true in 2004, but you're still going to overcompensate. That's one of the problems that you're going to get with an anthology. One of the problems we're going to get until we get to the halfway point of this book where it becomes all problem. One of the problems is that you're going to overcompensate in that direction maybe a little. It won't be everything. The whole book won't be overcompensation, but out of good intentions, out of good conscientious intentions, you might overcompensate a little. And the other besetting sin of anthologies is that if you're an editor and you're putting in long hours of work, I think this book, I don't know anything about these people or about this book, but I think this book was the product of an enormous amount of effort. It feels that way. It's a really good anthology. If you're doing that, as an editor, you're going to feel entitled to a little bit of leeway when it comes to what you include. There are two ways that you can express that leeway. Both are bad. All bootless self-indulgence is bad, but one is worse than the other. The lesser of those two evils is to include some idiosyncratic favorite of yours who does not belong in an anthology like this. Just, if you were being honest, the person wouldn't belong in the company of the other poets who are in here. You see this all over the place. You don't need to go through the huge effort of making an anthology. If you're just making a list for your blog of the 150 greatest science fiction novels of all time, you might think, well, researching these and writing these descriptions and getting all of this together is a lot of work. So I'm thinking somewhere around 91 or 92, I'm going to slip in A Princess of Mars. Now, I love it. I know it doesn't belong here, but I love it. And damn it, I'm entitled. You might do that, and that would be the lesser of those two personal indulgences. The greater of those two personal indulgences, by far, would be to include your own work. Do not include your own work in an anthology you are editing. Do not do that. No matter what. No matter what. No matter what you do. Don't do that. If an 80-year-old Thomas Jefferson were putting together an anthology of great American writing, I would tell him to leave out the friggin' Declaration of Independence. Leave it out. Don't include your own work in an anthology you're editing. There is no way to save that. It makes you look like the Prince of all Ponces, so don't do it. So far, anyway, because our editors are still alive, so we haven't encountered that sin. I don't know if we do. I haven't really looked ahead. But right now, for today, we encounter an example of the second one, which is including someone in here who is fairly minor. And just we've seen that a couple of times as we've made our way through this book. We're still making our way through this book. We will be well and truly shot of this book when we're done with it in 2 years. But the poet today is Melvin Tolson, and he is in here. Well, I actually don't know which of those two motivations it is. Either he's in here because he was a personal favorite of one of the editors, or he's in here because the editors felt that the collection needs more black poets. I don't know, one way or another. We've had plenty of black poets so far, but they might have thought that one more was needed. They just, unfortunately, instead of giving a few extra pages to a black poet who merits it, they gave a few pages to one who doesn't. Melvin Tolson does not belong to be in here, but I'll read you a poem. Maybe it will strike you a lot better than he's ever struck me. Maybe you'll think he does belong in here. So we'll do An Ex-Judge at the Bar. This is a poem from 1944. So you see, slowly but surely, the poems that we're reading are having later composition dates. Even though we're almost halfway through this book, quite a few of the poems that we have read were written in the teens and 20s. Now they're starting to inch forward to one particular year in the 1950s. But I'm trying to hold that at bay. I'm trying not to think about it. So we'll do An Ex-Judge at the Bar by Melvin Tolson. Bartender, make it a straight and make it two. One for you in me and the me in you. Not let us put our heads together. One is half enough for malice, sense, or fun. I know, bartender, yes, I know, when the law should wag its tail or rip with fangs and claw. When Pilate washed his hands, that neat event sent for us judges a Caesarean precedent. What I shouldn't make faces. I'm loading the deck here. I won't do that. That's not fair. Can you believe I did that all throughout the oh my god. Ooh, can you believe it? I won't do that. That's not fair. Well, you already know. to just count that. What shall I tell you now? As man is man, you'll find in neither Bible nor Koran. It happened after my return from France at the bar in Tony's Lady of Romance. We boys drank pros and cons, sang Dixie, and then the bar a Sahara we pledged to meet again. But lo, on the bar there stood in naked scorn the goddess Justice, like September morn. Two blindfolds Justice on the courthouse roof. Who blindfolds Justice on the courthouse roof while the lawyers weave the sleight of hand proof? I listened, bartender, with my heart and head as the goddess Justice unbandaged her eyes and said, to make the world safe for democracy, you lost a leg in Flanders Field. We. To gain a judge's seat, you twined the noose that swung the Negro higher than a goose. Bartender, who has dotted every I, crossed every T, put legs on every Y? Therefore I challenged her, lay on, Macduff, and damned be him who first cries, hold, enough. The boys guffawed, and Justice began to laugh like a maniac on a broken phonograph. Bartender, make it straight and make it 3. 1 for the Negro, 1 for you and me. And the point that I want to make about that is that it's bad. It's sing-songy Hallmark prose about serious things. How dare you write a couplet, whether you're Melvin Tolson or anybody else? Melvin Tolson, by the way, becomes, in the reading of this anthology, no less than the 10th person who is associated with the Harlem Renaissance, grouped as a Harlem Renaissance writer by our editors, who all his life vocally disavowed the Harlem Renaissance. They move up to 125th Street, but they don't want anything to do with that movement. But how dare you write a couplet like, to gain the judge's seat, you twined the noose that swung the Negro higher than a goose. What are you trivializing there? Why? How can you not see how utterly inappropriate your choice of rhythm is for your choice of subject? Who is this speaker supposed to be in this bar? Who in the world was ever this cynical that ever changed their mind about anything? And also, Justice, the statue of blind Justice at the top of the courthouse, is not bandaged. Her eyes are not bandaged. And what you ask, who blindfolded Justice? The law. That's what that conceit is meant to be. The law blindfolds Justice. But I'm not sure that I think that this poem sort of pivots at the midway point. Up until the halfway point, it's talking about friends meeting and vowing to meet again. It uses all sorts of cliches. Do you know some of the cliches? This thing is larded with notes at the bottom. Not to explain illusions, but to clarify cliches that wouldn't have needed any clarification in 1944 for a general readership, but would still have been lazy. That would have been what made them lazy. But then it pivots to race. Halfway in, the poem pivots to race, and stays there with that concluding line. That I don't think is in here for the rest. This author wrote. He was deeply and increasingly involved in what he referred to as the literature of his people. Negro literature is what he referred to it as. He was deeply involved in that. He made his name in poetic circles with a sequence of profiles that were very much about race. I don't know that this poem is, but maybe I'm just missing it. Certainly he wrenches it to try to be, but there's nothing heartfelt in here. This is if this is maybe I should look at his gallery poems for stuff that's more heartfelt. I didn't pick one of those. I'm hoping I'm not stacking the deck here. Maybe it's just that I don't like this author. I like him just fine, but I don't love him. I don't think that he belongs here. So it's a little bit lackluster. Look him up for yourself online. I'm sure that there's a body of his poetry online that you can get for free. Maybe Melvin Tolson will appeal to you in a way that he never did to me, especially if that poem did. But I'm afraid we've got a little bit of rough rating ahead because the next poet doesn't appeal to me either. He does belong in this anthology. The next one does, but he also doesn't do much for me. So we'll see. Maybe you will change my mind, or I will change my mind reading these things again. That is happening as I go through this anthology. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. That is Poetry Thursday, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.